So we're going to have a couple of speeches now, and I can tell you now that after the first few speeches we're going to try something very special. I don't think it's ever been done before, certainly not here in the middle of Berlin on Alexanderplatz. We're going to try and do a strip the willow. So, hope you're all up for that. But first of all, I'd like to join me please in welcoming our first speaker, Giada Mazzetti. Giada, she studied sociology and she has loved Scotland for many a year, just like all the rest of us. And she founded the group Italians for Scottish Independence in 2016 and is here to give us a few words of encouragement. Giada.
Hello to everyone. I'm Giada from Italy, and I am the Italians for Scottish Independence Group admin and creator. Thank you for inviting me to this march today. And I'm very glad to be here with you, our German friends, and with Scotland supporters from other nations. I think the international support for Scotland independence is now very important, and I know that it is very appreciated by Scottish people. No other moment in history is so positive for Scotland to seek and obtain independence. I am first of all a lover of Scotland, and my love for Scotland is the reason I am here today. I have a dream to see with my eyes before I leave this planet a Scottish Independence Day, and I hope this day will come with 2019 or at latest with 2020 or as soon as possible. In the meanwhile, I will do whatever I can to accelerate the dissolution of the Union with England. The word union has hidden an abuse of power by England that always treated Scotland like a colony, without the due respect, shadowing her uniqueness. Scotland and England have been in the Union for 3,012 years. Westminster has had full control of Scotland's economy for 219 of those years. When Scotland was given her own parliament 20 years ago, it was given 6% devolved power. And numerous years later, in 2017, this increased to only 15%. The 2014 Scottish independence referendum failed partly for the reason that Scotland wanted to remain in the European community. And now England is imposing Brexit on Scotland against Scotland's will, while the 68% of Scottish voted to remain in EU community. This is not a union. This is a dictatorship, a forced supremacy of England over Scotland, and now it's the time to stop it. Everyone who had the pleasure to visit Scotland and to meet the Scottish people perfectly knows that there are big differences between England and Scotland. Differences in mentalities, in beauty, in life's approach to others. Some numbers can explain it better. While the UK has the second highest childcare cost in the world, Scotland provides free university tuition since 2007, and is supporting childcare costs also with the Baby Box Last initiative. While the UK has the most expensive energy cost in Europe, Scotland has 50% of renewable electricity and carbon emission down 40%. While house building in the UK is lowest since 1923, Scotland built over 30,000 affordable social houses and refurbished or rebuilt over 600 schools. While crime in England and Wales is rising, in Scotland crime is the lowest in 42 years. And these are only few examples. I want to see Scotland shine, and shine in the European community. There's a famous Scottish song that sings, "If I would become a stranger, I would be more than sad." And I don't want to be a stranger in Scotland, because I want to visit it as a part of the EU. I want to live in an independent Scotland, and I want to feel free to make Scotland my home. There is a quote that says, "You can take the girl out of Scotland, but you cannot take Scotland out of the girl." It's so important that Scotland be part of the European community and no longer part of the UK. Scotland is the most beautiful place on earth. No country can match her amazing landscapes, where nature reigns supreme and fills the human heart with a deep sense of beauty. The silence and the peace of her untouched countryside, her amazing wildlife, the mysterious glens, the infinite horizons and colors of her skies, the magnificent hills, lochs, castles, villages and cities, where the time seems to be stopped long ago, the endless beaches and the jarring voices and the broad flight of thousands of seabirds, all these inspire me to scream, "Independence! Independence now!"
Ariel Killick was originally born and brought up in Australia, but is one of the many returning members of Scotland's diaspora and a Gaelic artist, and she's got a few words for us as well. Ariel.
Vielen Dank. There are two marches taking place today, telling the tale of two nations moving apart. Today, Nigel Farage leads his Leave Means Leave march from Sunderland, Northern England, to arrive in Westminster on the 29th of March, with his Brexit betrayal band of believers behind him like some Pied Piper, leading lemmings straight off the cliff onto a gold-plated ship he won't share with the followers he'll definitely leave to drown. Aber wir sind heute in das Herz Europas gekommen, aus den Herzen zu sagen, nicht nur mit unseren Stimmen, sondern 5-mal mit den Stimmen einer Nation. Wir möchten bleiben. But we, born Scots, new Scots, returning diaspora Scots, continental friends of Scotland and more, have come to the very heart of Europe today to say from the heart, not just with our voices, but with the votes of a nation 5 times, we want to stay. Wir möchten bleiben. There can be no more potent picture of the divergent paths of the two largest nations of Britain today. The farce of Farage, who repeatedly comes to the continent to insult you, marches to Westminster to demand an exit from the EU on the 29th, regardless of consequences he can well afford, but most of his followers can't. They march because they think democracy has been denied to them. We march today because we know it has been denied to Scotland. The Leave believers call it the Brexit betrayal, but it is the no voters of Scotland in 2014 who have been most betrayed, led to believe in the benefits of a Britain its leaders seem determined to destroy. Scotland was told the broad shoulders of the UK would help it punch above its weight. But now, Scotland just gets punched in the face. Its trade and travel freedoms lying broken on the floor in a battle England won and Scotland lost. This was not the union we were sold. When Scotland voted no in 2014 to stay in the EU. When Scotland voted to remain in the EU in 2016. When Scotland elected a majority of MPs on an anti-Brexit manifesto in 2015, in 2017, When a majority of Scottish parliamentarians at Holyrood voted for a second EU referendum in 2018 and Scotland's votes and voices are still ignored, this is not the union we were sold. Westminster wants to give itself vote after vote after vote after option after option after option to change its mind on a Brexit deal barely changed at all after a matter of weeks or even days. Yet Scotland denies the people of Scotland the option of a referendum Holyrood has repeatedly earned a mandate for. To defend itself against a material change Scotland never voted for. Former German President Christian Wolff once said that the Berlin Wall worked against its own people. Many would say the same of Brexit and British politicians today, working particularly against Scotland, who has constantly strived to protect its economy and citizens, Scottish and EU alike, while Westminster works to protect the interests of billionaires who bankrolled Brexit in a campaign based on lies and negotiated on fantasies. Westminster's willingness to tear Scotland out of the EU against its repeatedly democratically expressed will is the clearest sign that the union with Britain will never work for the best interests of Scotland. Tory and Labour politicians can barely bring themselves to stop working against their own parties. Never mind competently running another country they clearly don't care about and hold in barely concealed contempt. We are being driven in a chaotic clown car, determined to crash off a cliff with Scotland in the boot. Held hostage by Tories, Scotland hasn't voted into government since the 1950s. Scotland has played by the rules and sowed its hope in reaping the promise of democracy, that our actions, our votes and its principles mean something. Yet we find ourselves a prisoner of a process a resounding majority voted to avoid 5 times in Scotland, stripped of our European freedoms against our will. Our businesses, our industries, our economy endangered against our will. Our very ability to feed ourselves and our children endangered against our will. Scotland's nearest neighbour may not threaten us with barbed wire walls and guns, but the effect their choices will have on our economy and future is terrifyingly real. Václav Havel once spoke of living within a lie, which is exactly what those honeyed words of a precious union and a cherished equal member of a family of nations turned out to be. We no longer wish to be a nation living within a lie, in a union that claims to care for us, but constantly treats our leaders and all their contributions and compromises with contempt, forcing us into a future we repeatedly have voted to avoid. And that contempt Westminster has shown to our elected representatives. We've seen it beating sevenfold the backs of the disabled, people of colour, the poor and misfortuned, attested to by no less than the United Nations itself. We have seen the effects of that austerity by the number of their graves, the gravity of their suffering, and the growing numbers of food banks. Scotland's leaders were not elected to save us from this carelessness of Westminster, but to forge a better future. That is the day job. The Britain that demands Scotland be held hostage on a ship as it heads for the iceberg is not a union that's fit for our future. And I know people are genuinely concerned about the divisiveness of referendums, genuinely concerned about relationships with family, friends, partners, grandparents, children, and businesses, and valued clients. But here's the thing. The campaign to end slavery was divisive. The campaign to grant votes to women was divisive. Female protesters were literally beaten in the streets. But we have moved beyond those not so long ago disgraceful days because people voted. For once, we found ourselves on the right side of history. But we will no longer be on the right side of history if we stand by while a handful of DUP MPs can hold more sway over the future of Scotland than our own democratically elected Parliament. We will no longer be on the right side of history if we stand by while the number of London MPs alone can always outvote all of Scotland's MPs from all parties. And we will no longer be on the right side of history if we stand by in silence. In 2014, many of us erred on the side of caution to stay in a union that has only rewarded us since with constant contempt. The debate is difficult. It will be divisive, but it is a discussion we need to have. The fact is, there is no end point of history or in the evolutions of nations any more than there is an end to births or an end to deaths. Nor has the process of nations following their paths out of Britain to independence, as have some 60 nations sought to before us, come to an end. In fact, there may be no other country on earth than Britain for which there is a greater number of precedents, of roadmaps and templates for a country to gain independence from. In a city whose evolution was an example to the world of peaceful transitions to freedom, we also come here knowing independence for us also means interdependence, not isolationism or imperial delusions. A UK government that speaks of enhanced lethality and increased mass is one that has learnt nothing and changed little from the long-gone days of colonialism, still seeking to stoke the embers of empire, to fire up its future and rule the waves whilst waving the rules. It's true that Scotland also has its own shameful history, via its role in the many wrongs of slavery and colonialism. But you will not find Scotland's current leadership like those of Westminster, whose poor excuses for foreign secretaries have disgraced themselves more times recently than Scots care to remember. But you can find them as they are, right now, representing a country that voted 5 times to stay with you, to stand with you, and do the hard, always evolving work of government and representing our fellow citizens, to work with you and create a better European Union for all. Also, let us be clear, we do not wish to build a wall of any sort with England. Cross-border friendship, diplomacy and trade will always be both welcome and necessary. But in a place once defined by a wall, whose removal gave hope to humanity and showed the world that walls, however hard, could be torn down for the right cause, we plead for no walls to Scotland's re-entry to the EU. So many in today's European Union felt the benefits that began when that wall was brought down, reuniting a nation and removing regimes that worked against their own people. So today, we ask you, please remember your past when you think of Scotland's future. Dolgarja agus ceolcaracha celticha inéring le rodel coinigi a winche na halaba. We did not vote for this. And today in Berlin, we ask for no barriers to block Scotland from coming back to you, helping our belief may become reality, that a nation of EU citizens for over 40 years that voted 5 times to remain with you will soon be back with you. Bitte, unterstützen Sie Schottland auf einem Weg in die Unabhängigkeit und seinem erneuten Eintritt zurück in die Europäische Union. Danke.